Major General Bhupesh Kumar Jain. It is a matter of great pride to have a decorated gentleman from the armed forces of the stature of Major General Bhupesh Kumar Jain amongst us today. A qualified paratrooper and a skydiver, the General has over 36 years service in the Army. An authority on national security, geopolitics and geostrategy, he is a frequent participant in discussions in think tanks and national forums. He has done multiple tours of duty in Jammu and Kashmir, deployed to defend the line of control and in anti-terrorists operations. He was severely wounded during the peacekeeping operations in Sri Lanka. Major General Bhupesh Kumar was the Defence and Military Attaché of India in USA and Canada for over 3 years. He was responsible for defence of international border of southern Punjab, both north and south of Sutlej. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Major General Bhupesh Kumar Jain to share his views on the issues concerning national security and well-being with us.
Jain, ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed grateful to the management, president and everybody, Karta Dhartas of Indore Management Associations to give me this opportunity. My first one to come to a gathering where they are largely business people, and I note in lighter vein, as is the normal want in India, army is the weapon of last resort, and I get to have the last word as well today. And why do I stress that point in? Even when Indian Army was deployed in 1989 inside J&K, and where the elder generation would know most of what was happening at that time, what state J&K was in, because country wasn't even sure whether it will continue to remain part of India or not, the message from the political leadership was, you have no time. And the second point is that I want to stress on, unlike where all the speakers spoke here and they talked of their experiences and of learning from their failures, in the field that I operate, there are no runners-up. There is nothing for the guy who comes second. There is only prize for the first guy, and that's where the weapon is of last resort. We, those of us who are in the business of national security, are very well aware of one simple fact. There is no national security without economic security. And without you all, we can do nothing. We need you all. One. Two, we are only at your service. An army belongs to the nation, belongs to its people. It can only succeed with your support and no other way. I do not wish to go into too many of the theory parts. I would pick on certain experiences, examples from my career or from the situation in the world and drive home the points. And the first point that I want to drive in is my experience. I had the opportunity of being deployed, or my unit was deployed in the Prime Minister's residence post-assassination of Indira Gandhi. We reached there within 7 days of her assassination. In fact, within 36 hours, a small component of Indian Army had taken over the security, in fact, in first few hours only. And one of the key things that we got to know what actually happened. And it was very clear that two guardsmen, when she was traveling, and those who are familiar with Delhi would know, she was traveling from one Saftarjung road to one Akbar road. In between these two, personnel from her security gunned her down, which is known to all. But what all of you ought to know is they fired single shot and they took a lot of time. Less than 10 feet away from where she was gunned down was a component of his quick reaction team sitting, which was meant to protect her in case of any eventuality. And they never got out. And then they tried to destroy that evidence by trying to kill both these people. And when we talked to the people who were involved in this activity, they said they kept flagging this issue of the Prime Minister's vulnerability. What is the point that I'm trying to drive home? As far as national security is concerned, what we ought to understand is you ought to think tragically to avoid tragedy. So that's one component of business community, one statement which they have to understand. And for this, in order to enable India's secure development from a secure platform towards having a India 2.0, and it is stressed with destiny, primarily comes from an example given 500 years before Christ by a Greek philosopher, Thucydides. And he said, secure development of a nation state is enabled by human nature. And he gave 4 credentials to it. He said, it's either fear, self-interest, honor, and realism. The first 3 are well understood by you. What I intend flagging is 6 or 7 points which are dealing with realism. Let me go back to my own career. I got deployed in Sri Lanka where I got wounded, and we went there. You all are aware of the decision taken by the then Prime Minister to go in there. And and we had gone to serve the Tamil people. But what actually happened, within a month of that deal, when IPK was deployed, serial number 2 to 19 of LTT were intercepted by Sri Lankan army, and they were located at Palali. And Sri Lankan government wanted to carry them to Colombo. LTT didn't want them to move. And finally, LTT provided them with capsules with cyanide. They consumed it and they died. And that's what started India in conflict with LTT, the people whom we had gone to save. After a little while, and what is the message that I want to bring out of this? And this emerged very clearly in the second incident that I want to bring out, where LTT organization number 2, then Mr. Mathia, came for the prisoner exchange, and we had an interaction. And we tried to tell him as to why it is not good for us in Indian Army and them fighting, because we are here for together. And for that, LTT had to back down, and they will have to carry the rest of the Tamil organizations with them. And that is where I understood for which LTT wasn't ready. And the second message that I want to drive home is, as far as organizations and nations are concerned, their interests will always be placed by them before any values. That's another reality check we ought to have when you're dealing with this issue. And the second lesson which I brought it out of this, again, when we were fighting LTT, in one of the ambushes, we captured videographic and photo evidence of LTT and Sri Lankan government in a deal. And because LTT was weakened so badly by IPKF that they couldn't survive. Sri Lankan government did not want IPKF to succeed. So they started providing weapons, ammunition, and money to LTT. And that was made available to Government of India. The message that I want to leave behind is, the point that we made to the Government of India was, notwithstanding your passion for the well-being of Tamil people, it does not matter, passion and good policy will always go together. They often do not. So no wonder what Mr. Bajaj said, the reality check is passion and good policies necessarily do not get to go together. In fact, some people take advantage out of this, and as a business community, you got to be aware of this. The next point I I'm borrowing from the Charlie Hebdo incident recently which happened in France. And if you, those of you who are professionals and are following this incident, and you will realize one simple fact, that there's a great debate going on inside the French community, and they are questioning, is the freedom of speech is good enough reason? And there are many, many instances in our own, I deliberately have avoided giving reference to examples which I can pick out of my career or out of Indian polity, because I'm worried I may not, anger some sensitivities. The message that I feel is, which is emerging, and even you all, some of you must have heard what Pope said, order shall always come ahead of freedom. There's another one, you saw what happened when a boat from Karachi started and 26/11 happened. Another boat started this New Year Eve, and you all are aware what happened. What is the difference? Difference was simple. There were eyes and ears looking. So as far as the business community is concerned, having developed billions in dollars worth of assets, if you do not have eyes and ears on ground, then notwithstanding all your good intentions, enabling India's development or the prosperity of your own company is unlikely to be secure. You'll have to create the secure platforms towards it. Without that, it'll be problematic. And in one of the conversations, one of the gentlemen here, I told him, the interesting part is, if you have 1 rupee, you needn't worry. If you have $10 billion, then you have to build a fence around your house. But if you have $100 billion worth of assets, Government of India will protect you. The last example I pick is again from 26/11. Again, it may be known to, I don't know how many of you know that. We all know there were some handlers from Pakistan. There was one handler from India, and the crucial handler was from Qatar. And Qatar, for those of you who are aware in the gas business and oil business, ought to know that is sitting on top of gas, rather floating on top of it, has a stock exchange on gas which is the most powerful. And Qatar proxies today are leading in violence, starting from Tunisia right till Malaysia, including India. To an extent, countries such as United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia withdrew their ambassador from Qatar because of the support to the proxies. And finally, the Qatar Amir of Qatar had to secede, or correction, it had to abdicate towards his son to buy peace. And India found impossible to deal with Qatar on this issue. Finally, it took all of our engagement with America to finally get that guy to book. So we ought to understand, notwithstanding the finances that you have, notwithstanding the military might that you have, power, notwithstanding howsoever powerful you are, including America, will remain finite. And therefore, there is need to create allies and partners. And that's true for business communities also, particularly from security point of view. And lastly, every problem does not have an immediate solution. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll wrap up. Don't want to keep too long beyond the time of 5 o'clock. I'll just flag 2 issues, one to the west, nearby, and to the east. If you look at the west, starting from West Asia till India, by 1600 or 1700, we were the center of gravity of the world. By 1900, UK and the West was practically ruling from West Asia to East Asia. By 1950, UK had gone, America was there everywhere. And in the meantime, the rage due to of this West Asia, right till Pakistan, has turned to ultra-conservatism and terrorism. And there is this great conversation I hear inside public domain if we are somehow able to engage Pakistan, have a deal, or Kashmir, it's going to turn, and there'll be peace here. Let's please understand one thing very clearly from your security point of view. Until and unless this rage comes down, it's not going to happen. And that will only happen if social stability in this area comes in and development starts. And that might take another 100 to 200 years. So anybody hoping for the terrorism to end or militancy to end, because there is also a question there whether from terrorism comes early or militancy comes early. And if you read, we generally say militancy and then we take it higher to terrorism. I believe terrorism is terrorism. Militancy is towards a goal. So I would call it militancy is not going to end. Ultra-conservatism is not ending. The second point that I make, around us are unstable neighbor. So our domestic social stability, which Mr. Bajaj talked of, Mr. Gandhi talked of, a number of speakers here talked of, is unlikely to be there until we take our neighbors in part of this game. Be it Nepal, be it Bangladesh, be it Bhutan. You will find the instability in those countries will pass on to here and will impact your business. So you have to engage with them, you will be compelled to do that. Coming to the East Asia, if you look at that, we all are aware of the Chinese story, everybody knows. But Chinese have gone through their ups and downs from 800 onwards. In recent years, their overreach, American pivot, chain of allies, starting from South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, unfortunately, is too busy inside its own affairs, has created challenges for China. And India finds this is the opportunity, and rightfully so. Historically, to counter threats from neighboring areas, you always engage with distant powers, because that's where you draw your allies and strength and engage with them. And that's something which the business community has to understand if they need to ensure development from a secure platform. Inside these threats, there are great lot of opportunities. India will need to invest heavily into, as Mr. Gandhi was saying, in domestic internal security infrastructure and replace aging military equipment. It will have to undergo changes in doctrine, thinking, organizations, structures, starting from cyber to space to maritime and to soft power. Mumbai or the Bollywood or the Mumbai movie industry is not going to be good enough. In our views, there will be tremendous support of opportunities for business community, particularly in Indore, because you have cradle of military leadership next to you. You can interact with them, and that's what bulk of them have done. If you can create spaces where you can engage with these people who will give you the ideas because they are willing to talk, you just got to go engage with them. Indore is the place to create opportunities for business in defense industrial complex. And in my view, in order to do that, you have to carry out net assessment. Net assessment is nothing but scenario buildings, create scenarios, sit down. So I think Indore Management Association will be very well served if it goes and sets up a wing which carries out net assessment. And you will always be able to get military professionals who will come and help you explain what net assessment is. You can pick up that as a theme and you can carry it forward and conduct net assessment. Just one point on unpredicted eventualities. We all look at unpredicted eventualities as tsunamis, earthquakes, floods. Forget that. We all know we talk about it. Japanese domestic interest is 220% of the GDP. Remember erstwhile USSR, how quickly it unraveled? South Korea is the weakest link in the US chain. Your exposure to South Korean companies. Should that happen, what will happen? That net assessment will give you that assessments. It will create that scenarios. You can create that folder as business opportunities. So when that happens, you're not searching because you have done your homework before that. That is what is going to ensure that India's development takes place from secure platform and it meets it. Because it's in these situations how country reacts that ensures its continuous growth. To conclude, I leave behind 5 points. You must develop eyes and ears, must carry out net assessment and deal with realism. When you do that, don't allow yourself to bury your heads inside the sand. Develop credible soft power. That's what is going to carry you ahead. Consolidate and combine. As America became from world power, one of the world power, to only world power, the first thing Pentagon did was to call 27 companies into Pentagon and told them, till you are able to come down to 7 by emulgating, don't come back here. We'll give you not a single dollar. You have 6 months. You'll have to combine laterally, horizontally, vertically. Only then you are going to ensure India's development from a secure platform. And finally, I'm just repeating words of the great wisdom given to us by Mr. Bajaj. Social stability is the key. Demographic is not. It's not the education, sir. It is going to be skills. Jain, and thank you very much for bearing with me.